Hello, this is Josh and Brian from the Justkickin podcast. Today we are speaking with Andrew Wiseman, strength and conditioning coach for Celtic FC Women. Andrew will be presenting at the Next Gen Coaches 24-hour virtual conference hosted by Inspired Coach Education on July 29th, 2017. 24 presentations in 24 hours. I encourage you to go to inspiredcoached.com for more details on how to gain access to Andrew's full presentation and the presentations from 23 other great coaches and coach educators. Andrew, thanks for sitting down with us for a quick chat. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Thanks for the opportunity.
So like I said, strength and conditioning coach for Celtic FC Women, and I want to jump right into the content and get your thoughts. What do you think the biggest mistake strength coaches make when they start to work with soccer players?
Turning them into monsters. I've very much got the view that we need to be optimally strong rather than maximally strong. I've seen strength coaches. Yes, there is a place when people need to, or players need to add a little bit of size. But sometimes we go all out and start incorporating powerlifting and bodybuilding when that's probably a little bit further the other end of the spectrum. And again, if a player's carrying too much mass, they're probably going to lose a little bit somewhere else. So that's probably the biggest mistake I see. And also, one of the other ones would be not having a kind of holistic view and realizing it's not all about the strength work as well. There's other work that needs to be done, the pitch conditioning. Football's sort of acyclic in a way. There's so many different qualities, your speed, your strength, your power. While they're all sort of interrelated, they all take different kinds of training, and that has to be factored into 1 week, which cannot be easy at times.
Well, it's funny, like something you just brought up there that Brian and I talk about all the time is the misconception between size and strength. So a lot of times you'll hear coaches say, they'll say something to you, hey, Andrew, make her bigger, or make him bigger. Can you talk a little bit about that fallacy that being bigger and having more muscle mass doesn't necessarily mean that, one, you can use that strength, and two, that it's useful?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember who was talking about this last week, but saying there has to be some form of transfer into the game, what you do in the gym. So I've seen a lot of players, mainly on the men's side, that want to be big, massive, sort of do bodybuilding style training, swallowing like as many protein shakes as whatever to be big. It happens. But what I kind of say to them is, yes, you may need to add that little bit of size, but you've got to transfer it into the game. So you have to be able to build that strength to ultimately turn it into power and exert force. So if you want to run quicker, you need to exert more force. So going back to sort of Newton's 3 laws, etc. So it can be a tricky conversation to have, because let's be honest, a lot of people want to look good. The way I try and spin that is, it's functional to your game. So your training will level out actually and should end up that you look great, but also you're going to transfer that into a game, and that's far more important. It's far more important to be strong for the game rather than be strong so you look good on the beach. Sorry, you're right. It is a conversation that comes up a lot. I think possibly due to maybe the industry and the way that is, your men's health, your men's fitness. We have this idea, and women's health and women's fitness as well. You have these ideas that being very muscular is going to mean that you're strong. Well, you still have to be able to shift that mass and still have to be able to change direction quickly. So
now I can relate to what you're talking about specifically. I work with female athletes in soccer as well. So I'm curious to just get an idea, or maybe a quick snapshot. How do you deal with the different personalities within the Celtic FC team, where you have some players coming from the States, you have probably players originating from Scotland, you may have players from all over. How do you work with them to get them all on the same page? I'm sure some coming from a college system, right? It's max effort all the time versus someone that's saying, hey, I don't want to get real big. So how do you deal with that?
That's an interesting one. I think the players from the States are a lot more, they will understand athletic development a little bit more. They probably spend a lot more time in the gym rather than, on the technical side. Whereas our players, the Irish, Northern Irish, Scottish players, will have, actually Danish players as well, they'll understand a little bit more on the technical side, but the gym culture is maybe not the same. I think strength and conditioning actually in football is probably still in its infancy, especially in women's football. I think we see the benefits, and the players do see the benefits now of the injury prevention aspect of strength training. And that's one way that our players have really bought into that. They understand that, I don't mind saying it, our low injury rates can correlate to the work that we do. And that can go on the pitch side as well with our load monitoring, but also the gym work that we set with the players. And we like to think that we lead that the best we can.
So I'll give you this hypothetical situation. You have the opportunity of a blank room. There's nothing in it yet. You can go ahead and fill it with what you need to start training a women's football player. What is the one thing you will go after right away? It could be from the technical side, the equipment side. What is something that you're going to do to get the biggest gains for the time they'll be in there?
Oh, should I just go should I just say squat rack, because you can do so much with that? So then what would now you have your squat rack? What would be those exercises or things that you're going to do to get those biggest gains? Yeah, it depends on the player. I mean, you sometimes find people in the unilateral camp and the bilateral camp. I'm actually between the two. I don't think, obviously they both have their benefits. Football is generally a unilateral sport as such, but I think you need to build a base with both. I think with squatting as well, yes, we know the transfers into soccer, into football. I think mobility can also be an issue. Footballers can be notoriously tight in the hips, the glutes, maybe the hamstrings, especially with the female player. The hamstrings can be a little bit, let's say, less active. So we need to work on those areas. But certainly, a squat rack for all the different variations that you can use. These days you can do chin-ups on them anyway. So squat rack and a couple of bands for the mobility side of things. And just some weights, really. We're very, very lucky at Lennoxtown, our training ground at Celtic, which is also the men's first team and the academy there. That's their training ground. We are lucky that we have those facilities. Some clubs are not as lucky as us, so we have access to those, and we can use. We've got Kaiser machines, we've got squat racks, we've got our bikes, we've got anti-gravity treadmill. There's even a pool there. We're blessed with those facilities. So. But again, I think the key really is it's individual, what that player needs. We have some players in our first team squad that are 16, 17. Some just turned 17. They're still doing exams. So they're still in the developmental stage compared to maybe a player that will be in her 30s that has played a bit, that her training age is actually relatively low if you talk in the context of resistance training. So that's something that we look at. How much do we individualize those training programs? But again, in team sport, it's not that easy.
Yeah. Well, I know that you've had to have dealt with this as an S&C coach, because I know Brian and I have, is the sport coach that maybe looks at you and says, Andrew, I don't want my players lifting weights. I don't think it's going to help them. They need to do everything on the pitch, everything with the ball. How do you handle that conversation with a coach to try to give your best argument for why the gym is important?
Take him in there. Put him for a session. Yeah, it is a good one. To be honest, I haven't had much experience of that. Most of the managers I've worked with on the men's side and the women's side have been really good. They understand. I think we have, as we've evolved, in sports science and strength and conditioning, we really see the benefits. So I haven't had to have that conversation. Conversations I've had is more pitch time. That's one that comes up often. You've only got 10 minutes, you've only got 20 minutes. David, our head coach, is really good. I often sit down with him, or we'll talk on the phone and say, look, we're lucky we have our GPS data as well, plus our subjective data we collect from the players. So we tend to plan everything around then. So I probably know in advance if he's going to tell me how long I've got, because I'll see that data before I send it to him. And then you just argue your case that, it's going to benefit our players. But for anyone that does have that conversation, I know we're obsessed by data and obsessed by spreadsheets, but if you can make some form of relationship between injury prevention, at the end of the day, the coaches and the head coach will say to you, are they fit? That's all they want to know. Is that player fit to play? Are they strong? Are they injury free? And if you can show that your training is doing that and producing that, then the head coach should be quite happy.
Well, that brings up a kind of interesting dilemma we see now in soccer, where we have this massive increase in big data, like the technology, the monitoring, you have GPS, you have all this stuff, and yet we still see a lot of injuries, particularly hamstring and groin. What do you think is the culprit? Why are we seeing so many injuries still?
Yeah, it's another one that comes up so much. The game's got quicker. We know that. It's the high-speed run has increased. Probably coaches will look at distance. We'll probably look a little bit more at high-speed running and see what that player's done. What we tend to do is we look at every training session, we map it out, and then if there is an injury, we go back to it and see what was done in that session that may have triggered that. So, we collect data every day off the player subjectively, and we try and look and see what is it that's caused that. Hamstring injuries, a quite vocal coach was talking about this the other week. It's one of those things that it's multifactorial. It's like an ACL injury. You'll hear, and it's true, weaker, lateral hip muscles could cause a knee injury and ACL. But there are other factors with a female athlete. You've got the menstrual cycle. Mid-cycle is the most common time for that injury to occur, is what the evidence tells us. But that may not be the only reason it occurs. I know of a player, I think we were talking, she was on her second ACL. I was doing a study on her and I interviewed her. Now, generally, some of the evidence, or a lot of the evidence, points to it being later in the second half for an ACL. Hers was done in the first half, in the first 15 minutes. Again, it was a cutting movement. So yes, we can look at that and say, was she weaker in certain areas? It was her second ACL. It was contralateral, which is incredibly common. But again, these are all factors into that injury. And it's the same with hamstring injuries, dehydration, fatigue, we know. There's so many factors in it. And while our strength training, Nordics get good and bad press, I think they're part of a program. Probably put my neck out a bit and say they're maybe not the full answer, but they need to be part of a broader spectrum of exercises. I think Aidan Oakley did some work there the other week with some different hamstring exercises, and that's what we need to bear in mind. I think we tend to look at an injury, panic, and go mad on it, and not actually look at the reasons behind it. Because I think that, and that's also because the science can be a little bit further behind. We're a little bit more advanced, but still in the women's game, to my mind, to the knowledge, the ankle is still the most injured part. Obviously ACL is in there, it's up there. I think hamstring for soft tissue, we probably know why that is slightly more with the female athlete than we do the male, but there are just so many factors.
Well, this is probably a tough question because you just said it's multifactorial, but if you could recommend to every coach listening one thing to add to their program or one thing to subtract to have the best improvement in injury rates, what do you think it would be?
I would certainly look at, so we do neuromuscular circuits, as I call them. I've spoken that before at the start of training, especially with the female athlete. Landing mechanics, plyometrics. Plyometrics is one that also gets thrown about without the true principles being behind it. Maybe not so much at the elite level, but if someone can't land correctly and you're making them jump over 10-foot hurdles, your injury rate, you'll probably get a sack before the end of the season. Leg work. It's true, I've seen it. Subtract. Volume isn't a biomotor quality, but seems to get put in there. It seems to get absolutely smashed, and it's not. Sometimes we need to hold back on that. On the volume, it can be a strength coach's favorite. They haven't done a lot this week. Let's get some volume. Let's get some volume through them.
Josh just likes volume. Period.
Yeah, for myself.
It does have its place. It does have its place. There are times the way we tend to work is. you know, alternating the volume and intensity. But yes, that's one thing I would look at. Is probably the first thing I look at. You know, what's the volume of training this week? But we need to know what players can handle, and they are all different. Everybody's different. So.
I was touching on my opinion on the subjective data and GPS. I think that's become a governor now, just to get the head coach to realize maybe too much is too much, right? It's the sports performance coach's way of kind of saying, hey, back off a bit, maybe. I don't know, but that's just my opinion. But
yeah, no, I agree. I'm actually hopefully getting the permission to run a study on this soon. But yes, it is important. You know, we keep saying to our players, and the way we speak to our players, we say, this is for your protection. We're protecting you. The data we collect is protecting you. So please give us it.
Yeah.
You know, we use an app, and we collect it via an app. So it's not very invasive. You know, it takes 20 seconds to fill that out. So
yeah,
but it's important.
Well, I'm going to go into a couple quick questions here before we start wrapping it up. But what is something that you've changed your mind about recently, you know, maybe in the last year, regarding how you train soccer players?
Do you know what? I think probably maybe have been guilty in the past. I sat down with our head coach at the end of last season, so before the start of this season, and we spoke about how much time the players spend on the ball. You know, players do view running, out and out running, as punishment. And that's something that I've had to look at and had to adapt. So when we do the on-pitch or the field conditioning, the pitch conditioning, are they working? Are they with a ball? Are they ticking off all the physical qualities that we're looking for? Maybe the reactive speed endurance. Are we doing that? And in a way, kind of disguising it a little bit. You know, we do many little drills. Adam Owen is great for those kind of drills. We'll do those drills and almost so it's disguised for the players. They understand because we speak to them before the session, say this is what we're looking for, this is the outputs we're looking for, so that they understand what the drill is about. But I think you need to be able to almost have that fun element and get them working. You know, I can't think of a player that hasn't done and I'll use speed endurance, a hard speed endurance session, has turned around going, I was bored of that, because we try and make it as inclusive as possible with the ball. Doesn't always happen that way, but
so what is something that you believe in wholeheartedly that not many people agree with you on?
I'm not going to say his name, but don't read his books. He's Dutch. No. Don't believe it. Yeah. Oh, God. Let me think. That's a tricky one. There are, I suppose, in sort of, I don't know. I mean, my presentation is about building those basics. If I go to that, so I think sometimes, I hope I'm not swerving the question here, but I think sometimes we end up going too far. I use a pyramid system, and we end up going right to the top without actually getting those basics in. And I'm very keen to use work with the players on the basics. Master those first. I think, as maybe when I was younger, you try to go to the top. I know Brendan Rodgers spoke about this the other week in an interview, and he was saying that young coaches they rush everything. They want to get in, they want to do this. You want to get all this in within a season, and it just doesn't work like that. And I think strength coaches, we're the same. You see an exercise, you're like, wow, this is brilliant. Actually, the flashier it is, the probably further away it is, as in benefiting a player. You know, because I've seen some awful stuff. I think one manager I had asked to get flashing lights in. I was like, no, you're all right.
Well, it's funny because you're talking about coaches that are maybe influenced by information that they read, but with the information age, we see a lot of players that have access to the same articles and things, and they might, you might see them doing something in the gym, and they'll be like, oh, coach, I saw a great article on, in this magazine, like you mentioned, Men's Fitness earlier, and now they're doing that program. So what is maybe the worst piece of advice you hear given to the athletes directly regarding their physical performance?
Oh, there's a lot. There's a few.
Not the top 10, just one.
Take this up and you'll be fine. Get on there and go and do it. There's quite a few. I think we're the staff we have at Celtic, we educate the players as much as we can. They understand why they're being monitored. They understand why we make interventions. So they're quite good like that. I did have a player say to me recently, why do we not monitor muscle soreness the day after training? And that's purely time, because our players are still, although they're in 5 times a week, they're still part-time. And it was as simple as that. And that had come through someone else who works with football and wanted to understand why we didn't do it as everyone else did. And it's just simple time, because you train in the evenings. So a lot of the advice, yes, some of it's good, some of it's incredibly poor, but does it fit what we're doing? Does it actually fit what the players we have and how we're trying to work with the coaches? We're all in this together and we're all trying to ultimately get the players to perform. So it's a difficult one to say, because it comes up all the time. One around nutrition. I shouldn't eat carbohydrate. Yeah, it's probably well, it is. There's no probably about it. It's your main source of fuel for performance. Maybe with a female athlete, we've seen that sometimes nutrition is an area that tend to be a little bit more standoffish, where we don't or they don't consume as much to perform. That can happen on the male side as well. So I think nutrition is probably the one that confuses everyone. Ultimately, it's you're working the performance backwards, really. You're working back from that performance to try and get enough calories into players. And while we have a nutritionist at the club, I will say it's not my specialist area. We do have a nutritionist. But yeah, I would think around that there's quite a few that come up.
To just get you out here as we start to wrap up, you alluded to your presentation, which is going to be on, the 24-hour athlete and pursuing the basics every single day to maximize performance. And I just wanted to see, for everybody listening that, is eager to watch your presentation, can you just give us a little information on what we can expect to learn?
Yeah. So I had a good think about it. I came up with quite a few ideas. But like I said earlier, I think one of the areas that we tend to just disregard is the basics. We've got to, you wouldn't buy a house with, if there's cracks in the wall, it's not the wall, it's probably the foundations. So you need to look at those, and, you'll hear it so many times that, you'll see 10-year-old kids in compression garments. Do they need that? I've seen it. Do they need that? And you'll hear parents asking you, does my son need whey protein? No. Just eat. We have to get those basics right. So the presentation, the 24-hour athlete, is it's nothing new. It's nothing groundbreaking. Sort of looking at nutrition, mindset, recovery, those areas, regeneration. That comes from, I think Exos popularized that. Taking little bits out of that and saying, where can we put that within, youth development? And are we actually, I think the key to the presentation is to get people thinking, actually, we go above and beyond what we need to do. Maybe we should just sleep and eat better. And that will be a better transfer into performance over 24 hours or, longitudinally over a season than buying things that don't need to be bought for a 10-year-old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm now excited to watch your presentation, because I think what you're alluding to, I think it was Team Sky, right, that started the whole marginal gains thing and pursuing top 1%. And I believe it's Steve Magnus, who's a cross-country coach, but he says, people are so consumed with that 1% at the top that they neglect the 99% that we're supposed to have.
And there's something it's made me think in the last couple of years, and I'll admit, as a younger coach, I was a former player, so I was only ever used to that side of it, and then took up sports science and strength and conditioning, and you're maybe not as advised as well as today. The kids coming out of uni these days, they're a little bit more clued up, but I sometimes think the communication and the transfer of that is poor, and people get lost in translation, and that's what I hope to do with the presentation, and say, look, save your money. Johnny at 10, plays for Arsenal, great, probably doesn't need caffeine gels. He should be all right. He should be all right. He should have enough energy. So those kind of things, and looking at those areas, and obviously, youth development, you've got maturation in there as well. And if I put my hand on my heart, you know, you could end up really doing some damage to someone, a younger player, if you don't know what you're doing. So,
well, and a perfect note to go out on so people can watch your presentation and learn how they can, you know, stop avoiding going for the top of the mountain and focus on just, you know, climbing it one step at a time. So, Andrew, I appreciate you sitting down with us. It was great to chat and get to meet you and talk. And yeah, we look forward to your presentation.
No problem. My pleasure.